Module 4, Comparative Advantage and Trade. In this module, you will learn how trade leads to gains for an individual or for an economy, the difference between absolute advantage and comparative advantage, and how comparative advantage leads to gains from trade in the global marketplace. Before we get started with actual content, pause the video and take a minute to set up your notes. Remember, this format will highlight key ideas and help you when you look back at your notes to study. Gains from trade. What all have you eaten today? Did you grow it? Or did even your parents grow it? Why not? Where did you get it instead? What about your clothes? Did you make them? Why not? Are you better off because you can focus on being a student while someone else focuses on growing food or manufacturing your clothes? Sure you are. And this is the basic idea behind trade and why we trade. The ability to trade allows us to specialize and to be more productive in our field. Consider a trip to the dentist. You arrive and you are greeted by a receptionist. A hygienist takes x-rays of your mouth and cleans and polishes your teeth. In the last 5 minutes of your visit, the actual dentist shows up. She inspects the work of the hygienist and asks if the hygienist has found anything out of the ordinary in your mouth. Why doesn't the dentist perform all of these tasks? Isn't she qualified to greet you at the door, to take the x-rays, to clean and polish your teeth, and determine if there are any problems? What is the dentist doing while you spend your time with the hygienist? She may be doing extractions, cosmetic surgery, root canals. You know, the stuff that actually requires a medical degree to perform. So if your dentist performed all the tasks that go on in a typical visit to the dentist's office, much of the specialized work might go undone. By employing a receptionist and a hygienist, all three can specialize and much more production is done. Specializing is just allowing us to develop a specific talent, become really good at it, and then we can use that to trade for other goods and services. Markets allow a free exchange of specialized talents. As we each become more productive in our specialty, as a collective, we are able to produce more goods and services at higher quality and lower price. It is easy to see how this works for you as an individual at the micro level. Now let's consider it at the macro level by looking at production possibilities curves of two countries. Please note that this is a theoretical scenario not based on actual numbers. Let's say that we're looking at the countries, the United States and Bangladesh, and that each produce only cotton shirts or malaria medication. Remember, even though we know more things are actually produced than just these two items, we want to simplify our model. This production possibilities curve shows what production possibilities of the United States and Bangladesh would look like in our scenario. In this situation, we can see, based on our understanding of production possibilities, that the United States can produce more of both cotton t-shirts and malaria medication. When a country can produce more of one good than another country, we say that it has the absolute advantage. Absolutely, it can produce more. We would determine this by looking at who could produce more of a good if it was the only good they produced. So if both countries produced only malaria medication, the U.S. would produce 1,000 units and Bangladesh 250 units. The United States produces more malaria medication. Or if both produced only cotton t-shirts, the U.S. would still produce more in this case. The U.S. can produce 1,000 t-shirts, where Bangladesh can only produce 750. Now, this is not always the case. We know that sometimes countries have a good or service that they are known for and that they produce in large numbers and high quality. But we also know that some countries are definitely more productive than other countries. So when we have a situation like this, why would the U.S. still find it useful to trade with Bangladesh? And what would those terms of trade look like? In other words, what would the U.S. want to trade for and how many of the other goods? Pause the video here and summarize the first set of notes before you get started on the next section. We will now go into the second set of notes. Use this page of notes to detail the comparative advantage model. Write down the various steps of the problem we are working on. Draw the curves. Create the chart that you will see in a minute, leaving plenty of room to add beyond what you see in the first slide. Take notes around the chart showing what everything needs or means. This is a super important economic model. There's a very strong chance you will have an FRQ with a comparative advantage element involved. When considering terms of trade, you may see a question such as this. Will these two countries gain from trade if 100 units of malaria medicine are traded for 200 cotton t-shirts? Well, let's look back at our countries and determine what each country would find beneficial. Now, when you're given numbers such as these large ones, it always helps if you can get it down to smaller numbers. Note, 100 units of malaria medicine traded for 200 cotton t-shirts would be equivalent to trading 1 unit of malaria medicine for 2 cotton t-shirts. So, would these be favorable terms of trade? Would each country gain something in this trade? Next, let's consider each country's production possibilities by setting up a chart like this one. Go ahead and draw this in your notes. This chart just highlights each country's production possibilities for each product. Basically, it shows if the country produced only one of this good, how much could they produce? Notice, this also highlights which country has the absolute advantage in production. The next thing we're going to have to do is find the opportunity cost of production for each country. Opportunity cost will be measured in terms of how much of the other good is given up for each unit produced. To find the opportunity cost, we will use our charts and do some simple algebra. We isolate each variable by dividing on both sides so that we know what 1 unit of product will cost us in terms of the other product. So, for the United States, looking at their ability to produce cotton t-shirts, if they produced 1,000 cotton t-shirts, they would give up the ability to produce 1,000 units of malaria medication. By isolating cotton t-shirts, done by dividing by 1,000 on both sides, we simplify that to 1 cotton t-shirt equals 1 unit of malaria medication. And because both numbers are the same, this looks the same in the malaria medication column for the U.S. For Bangladesh, if they produce 750 cotton t-shirts, they are given up the ability to produce 250 units of malaria medication. This time we're going to divide by 750 to isolate our cotton t-shirts, our C, and that gives us the simplified version. One cotton t-shirt will cost us production of 1/3 units of malaria medication. For the malaria medication, using the same process, we find that 1 unit of malaria medication will cost us the production of 3 cotton t-shirts. I would recommend that you always show this process. This is going to allow you to track your mistakes. It's going to allow me to see what your thought process was so that I can give you more feedback. And it will help you as you are looking back to study this later in the course. We said before that absolute advantage is a question of which party has a higher productive capability for good or service. We know that in our example, the U.S. has the absolute advantage in producing both malaria medication and cotton t-shirts. However, now we need to consider another idea, comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is very different. Comparative advantage asks which party has the lower opportunity cost of production. So, who gives up fewer malaria medication units to produce t-shirts? And who gives up fewer t-shirts to produce the malaria medication? Now, something to realize. One country can have absolute advantage in 2 products, but they will never have comparative advantage in 2 products. Terms of trade should be developed around who has comparative advantage in each good or service and what would be fair terms of trade based on their opportunity cost of production. So who has the comparative advantage in t-shirts and malaria medication? If we look at malaria medication, the U.S. will give up 1 t-shirt for each unit produced, where Bangladesh will give up 3 t-shirts for each unit produced. So the United States has a comparative advantage in malaria medicine because they only give up 1 t-shirt, while Bangladesh must give up 3 t-shirts. Looking at the cotton t-shirts, the U.S. will give up 1 unit of malaria medication. However, Bangladesh will only give up 1/3 a vial of malaria medication. So here, Bangladesh has a comparative advantage in producing t-shirts because they only give up 1/3 unit of medicine, while the U.S. must give up 1 unit of medicine to gain that cotton t-shirt. The terms of trade are the next element of the question. Terms of trade are mutually beneficial as long as they are between the 2 countries' opportunity costs. For example, any amount of medicine greater than 1/3 and less than 1 traded for 1 cotton t-shirt would represent mutually beneficial terms of trade. So, if the trade was 1 cotton t-shirt per 1/2 vial of malaria medication, or maybe 2 t-shirts for each vial of malaria medication, that would be a mutually beneficial term of trade. Likewise, any number of cotton t-shirts greater than 1 and less than 3 traded for unit of medicine would represent mutually beneficial terms of trade. So if we just flip around the idea of 2 t-shirts for 1 malaria medication and say 1 malaria medication for 2 t-shirts, that fits this scenario as well. So, does this meet our initial criteria of 1 unit of malaria medication for 2 cotton t-shirts? Indeed. our original question would allow us to produce favorable terms of trade. Pause the video here and summarize this page of notes before you get started on the next section. If these ideas are swirling around in your head and you're feeling a little dizzy with all of this language, go back and listen to it again. Draw the charts. Look at the numbers. Play with this until it makes perfect sense. It's very logical, but sometimes because these are new vocabulary terms and new concepts that you're looking at, it might be a little bit dizzying the first time you look at it. We will now go into the next set of notes. Use this page to continue practicing with the production possibilities model as you are presented with a problem where you have to find comparative advantage and favorable terms of trade. Castaway Tom from our production possibilities module finds that he isn't alone on his island. Castaway Hank has been hanging out on the other side of the island. They meet to discuss if they should specialize in trade. Pause the video and try this problem for yourself. Determine the favorable terms of trade for Tom and Hank, as well as who has absolute and comparative advantage in production. Go ahead and pause the video here so that you have a minute to figure it out before you see the answers. Here, you can see our opportunity cost of production. Even though Tom is the more productive individual, having the absolute advantage in both coconut and fish production, Hank has comparative advantage in producing coconuts because he has a lower opportunity cost in producing those coconuts. Tom, on the other hand, has the comparative advantage in producing fish because he gives up fewer fish than Hank for each unit of fish that he produced. Hank would benefit if he were to receive between 1/2 to 4/3 of a fish for each coconut. Tom would benefit if he were to receive between 3/4 to 2 coconuts for each fish. Let's prove this with some numbers. Here you can see what both Tom and Hank could produce on their own without trade. They are producing at a point on their production possibilities curve that they find to be optimal for their preferences. They can consume only what they produced since they are not trading. If each of them specialize and produce the item they hold the comparative advantage for, we know from before that Hank will produce coconut and Tom will produce fish. Now they trade and are able to consume more than they produce. Notice that with trade, it isn't that they are producing outside their production possibilities, but they are consuming outside their production possibilities. They can reach a point in consumption that would be unattainable if they were producing by themselves. Looking at the numbers, you can also see that even though Tom is more productive, both parties come out ahead. And while Hank seems to gain more units, Tom, as the more productive member of the group, still gets to consume more than Hank. Pause the video here and again summarize your notes, and then we're going to finish up this module. Here are some additional resources to help you study and provide you with more practice with this type of problem. You will have an FRQ question around comparative advantage in terms of trade on your Unit 1 test. So it is super important that you give yourself lots of practice with this and that you can do this in your sleep so that it is a super breeze and you know how to do it forever and ever and ever until the AP test at least. This is the last slide of the video. Review your notes, add your own examples where you can. Mark questions you have that you wish to discuss in class tomorrow, and write any questions you want me to go over in class on a note card, sticky note, or a small piece of paper that you can give to me as you enter class